Okay, so in this lecture, I'm going to cover customer tracking and recommendation. So customer recommendation is a process in which we're suggesting products to the customer that they might want to buy based on previous stuff they bought, based on the season, based on the customer data, browsing history on your website, browsing history on other websites, or some other information. So, you know, one might hope that the customer will just come to you and buy lots and lots of stuff. But the reality is that websites competing against each other, so if they can propose things to the customer that they sort of don't realize that they want to buy, but might buy if you propose it to them, then you can make more money from your website. That's the general idea. So if you look at Amazon recommendations, so here we got like things that I've been viewing on Amazon. So I was looking at some kind of bike lock attachment thing. So maybe I looked at that like 2 or 3 days ago, and then I've come back to the website, and it's kind of proposing, you know, that maybe I've looked at this before, maybe I'm still interested in buying it. Also on Amazon, I think I took this picture, you know, it was around about Valentine's Day, right? So it's proposing things based on the season. And maybe Amazon, no doubt, in the background knows about how old I am, where I live, sorts of, you know, kind of product, you know, my sex most likely. So all these kinds of things will be built into some kind of complex statistical model in Amazon that's used to propose different things to me. I mean, it's not amazingly sophisticated, actually. You thought it might be slightly better than that, but that's the idea. So when I'm talking, so that's customer recommendation. Customer recommendation can be based on all these things, but customer tracking and recommendation is a matter of taking into account the customer's behavior on your website and then proposing things to them based on that behavior. So things like season isn't really based on the customer's behavior, right? You know, they, you know, live in a country in which there's Valentine's Day, but that's, you know, not very important. It's not really customer specific, the seasonal recommendations. And the customer data like age and location, again, it's not really based on their behavior. It's just based on, you know, some basic data that stays static for pretty much all time. So customer tracking and recommendation means we're using the previous purchases, maybe the browsing history on the website or the browsing history on other websites to make suggestions to the customer about products they might want to buy. Now, the problem with previous purchases is that they already have that thing, right? So in this, let's have a little example here. So going back to my example here, there's a little, supposing I looked on Amazon and I bought, you know, this sort of thing for attaching a bike lock to a bike, right? Suppose I bought that. You know, then there'd be very little point in recommending that to me like a week later because I'm, you know, the proud owner of this piece of plastic, right? I don't actually need another one that does the same job for me. So previous purchases is not a particularly good strategy unless you're going to kind of do some kind of complex evolution over time and know that, you know, if I was being dead clever about this, I might know that this piece of plastic will only last 6 weeks because it's a piece of junk. And so in 6 weeks' time, I might propose a better quality piece of plastic to replace the one that, you know, is obviously just broken. But this kind of, you know, super sophisticated stuff is not done by any website, really. Or it's more relevant to what Amazon does do is you can buy things on repeat orders. Again, it's nothing clever about that, but if I buy some washing up liquid, for example, like a month ago, you can do a rough guess that the washing up liquid will have run out by now, and maybe now would be a good time to make recommendations. So it's not impossible to do things based on previous purchases, but it's not necessarily the best approach. Now, the browsing history on other websites. So from vague recollection, I think there are some ways in which some websites that are kind of working together with a kind of common advertising policy or whatever might be able to exchange data with each other such that, you know, on my browsing history on Facebook, for example, could be used to target Amazon ads on Facebook. So possibly not, you know, not an expert on this kind of thing, but it's, you know, a plausible way in which you could do advertising. So if I'm browsing on Facebook, you know, and I happen to look a lot at or have a lot of friends who are into motorsports, for example, you know, maybe Amazon would recommend me, you know, some kind of motorcycling helmet or something like that. But what we're going to focus on here in this talk is the browsing history on your website. And this is exactly what Amazon's doing here. This is based upon the browsing history on Amazon. So in the e-commerce websites, I think there's about 10 marks for customer tracking recommendations, so 5 marks for tracking the customer effectively, and 5 marks for making recommendations. Another thing I want to say before we crack on with this is, so there are obviously privacy implications for all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to talk about that in the lecture on security, privacy, legal issues. So very briefly, the EU has legislation on the kinds of tracking that are okay to do, so you can use cookies and HTML local storage to store some kinds of data to facilitate the customer's experience on the website, for example. But this kind of tracking, you need the customer's explicit consent. So you often see like this kind of cookie consent form popping up at the bottom of the page. So there's EU legislation on that. I'm going to cover that in detail in the privacy lecture. But obviously, if you're doing this on a real commercial website, you need to make sure you're compliant with the law and you get the customer's permission to track them. Most people will just like get rid of that annoying cookie message and have no issues with that. But some people are a little bit sensitive about it. So you need to be compliant with the law on it. So yeah, we're going to cover this kind of stuff based on what they've looked at but not bought. We're going to propose to them things that they might want to buy. That's the idea. So customer tracking recommendations, complex science involving lots of statistics and machine learning. I'm not expecting you to do all that statistics and machine learning. You know, if you want to go into data science, then you can make lots of money out of it these days, you know, easily 75, 100K. So, you know, it's a good thing to get into, but obviously I'm not going to cover that in a single lecture. And actually, based on what I've seen on, you know, various websites that I shop on, the actual tracking recommendation isn't that sophisticated or clever. It's really not that clever what Amazon's doing here. You know, I look at some bike parts. They do some related, you know, promote some related products to me. This is not super uber sophisticated data machine learning analysis. Amazon certainly has the money from that. I'm sure they're spending the money on that. But you know, the results from like really lousy customer tracking recommendation, you know, maybe you're going to get like 70% the performance of some kind of super sophisticated machine learning algorithm. So with some kind of lame approach, you can get maybe most of the way towards what commercial companies are achieving. They're just making, you know, improving that by about 20, 30% at a very rough guess. So, you know, a simple approach for a website that, you know, doesn't involve billions of dollars is absolutely fine. So it's good to learn a simple approach, and that's what I'm going to teach you here. And what we're going to do, what I'm going to show you, you're welcome to do this any way you like. This is not prescriptive in any way. I'm just going to show you one way in which you can do customer tracking recommendation. And this way is we record the searches carried out by the customer. Now, as I said, the more sophisticated approach will be not to look at searches, but to look at sort of eyeball time or something. Using JavaScript, you can track, you know, what the customer's looking at, how long they look at it, all this kind of stuff. You know, the sort of the longing gaze of the customer, something like that. But in this case, we're just going to record the searches, and then we're going to store the data locally. Or in this case, we're going to store it locally. And then the idea is that we'd search the database of products that match the most popular keywords. So we're going to track the popular keywords that the customer searches for. So maybe they search for, I don't know, batteries, and then they search for mugs, and then they search for batteries again. So if they're looking a lot at battery products, we want to recommend them battery products, right? And so we keep track of the keywords, and we find the most popular keyword, and then we use our index search on MongoDB to find products that match the keyword, the most popular keyword searched for by the customer. And then we can display these results to the customer in a related items section. That's the idea. That's a simple example. Again, I'm going to use object-oriented JavaScript. This time no Ajax, just simple object-oriented JavaScript. If you haven't seen the lecture on object-oriented JavaScript, look at the advanced JavaScript lecture earlier in this course. We're going to use local storage for this, you know, just because it's easier to do a demo. But obviously, you could use the same approach that I used in the object-oriented basket to synchronize, you know, some kind of, in your customer's document, you could have a field with like the keyword, most popular keyword, and then when the customer logged in, or, you know, you knew the customer was active, you could use that. But in this case, we're just using local storage. I'm only showing you the JavaScript front end instead. I'm not doing any PHP here. So I haven't got any methods for searching the database for products that match the most popular keyword. It's just going to give you the tracking bit. The recommendation is up to you. So this is our simple recommender. We've got a constructor that creates this recommender object. And then we've got an add keyword when the customer does a search. We're going to add that keyword to our tracker. And then we've got a method that returns the top keyword when we want to do a recommendation. And then we've got saving and loading methods, so we can store the recommender in local storage and load it from local storage. Of course, these could be, you know, similar to the send and get methods that I had in my object-oriented basket. And delete all keywords is a method that we want the most recent, most popular keywords, right? If I search for something 20 years ago, I don't want to recommend that to the customer. So we've got to have a way of cleaning out the old keywords and only having the most fresh and most recent keywords to be the actual recommendation. So I'll just briefly talk you through the code. The code, as usual, is available on the course website. So this is the constructor. We initialize an empty array of keywords. Now this time window is a crucial factor in this. So in this case, because it's a demo, this time window is a millisecond. So this time window actually corresponds to 10 seconds here. And so we want to clean out the old keywords. Now, if this was a realistic system, I'd be using a time window a lot longer than 10 seconds, right? Customers aren't usually that fast. We maybe set this to about a week would be probably about right, I think. Because if you haven't bought something that you looked at a week ago, you're probably, is it really likely you're going to buy it again? I don't know. But in this case, because it's a demo, I've set this to 10 seconds. So any keywords that are older, that haven't been refreshed for at least 10 seconds, any keywords that are older than 10 seconds without a refresh will just be deleted from our recommender. And then this .load is going to load up the whatever's stored in local storage and put it in this keywords data structure here. So here's the load. Again, we're using prototypes here. We could have just used ordinary methods, but you know, hey ho, it's good to get familiar with this prototype stuff, right? So what this does, it sees if we've got, so we're using local storage, we've got a recommender keywords variable here, and we're going to see if it exists. If we haven't used it before, we're just going to create a new data structure, this.keywords, empty. Otherwise, we're going to access this string here, recommender keywords, convert it to a JavaScript object, and store it in our own object. So we're going to load it up from memory when the page loads, and then we're going to call this delete old keywords method. And so what this does, it gets the current time, and it works through all of the words that we've stored already, and we see if any of these keywords are older than 10 seconds. This is the time window here. So this would be a week if it was a realistic time window. But because it's a demo, I don't want to wait a week between adding keywords, so I've set this to 10 seconds. So any keywords that are older than the time window are judged to be expired, and we're going to just delete them from our array of keywords. Then we've got adding keywords. So we see if the keyword exists already in our data structure. If it's undefined, then we're going to add this object here that represents our keyword. The object has the count, i.e. the number of times this keyword's been added already. So this is if we're creating a new keyword here. Then we're going to put in the time at which it's created. So we've got the count of the keyword. The keyword itself acts as the key in the whole array. So this keyword points to this data structure, recording the number of times that keyword's been indexed and the time at which it was last refreshed. Otherwise, if the keyword already exists, then we increase the count, we increase the number of times that keyword's been searched for, and then we update the time. So each time the customer searches for the keyword, if it exists already, then the time is set to the present time so that the time keeps getting refreshed. And then just for debugging purposes, and I'll show you this later, we're going to output the keyword structure to the console so we can see what it's doing. Then we save it to local storage so if we refresh the page or whatever, we've got that our recommender keywords stored in the local storage. So save's very easy. We're just, standard stuff, stringifying it, stick it in the local storage with the recommender keywords. And then this is the method we would use if we actually want to generate the recommendations. So if I was, doing a proper website with this, I'd probably have an AJAX method that would get the top keyword, send it off to the server, and then the server would reply with a JSON document containing a list of the products that match the keyword, or a list of 10 products that match the keyword, and then I'd dynamically put them into the website. So I'd do this all with AJAX if I was doing it properly, but I'm not, so this is just demo. So when we call this function, all this does is it returns the top keyword. So first thing it does, it cleans out all the old keywords. We don't want any old recommendations here. And then it finds the keyword within the ones that are left. It'll look for the one that is the most popular one. So the one that's the highest number of searches within the time window. So this is the max count stuff. It's working through the keyword structure and looking for the keyword that has the most number of, that's been searched for the most. And that's this max keyword here. And then it returns it here. And then here's our page. So I'll just work through the bits. So here's we've got the search for products bit. So this is just a demo, right? So here we have first bit of the page. We've got a input bar, whatever, click on search, and all that search does is calls the search method, sensible enough, and then also the recommendations here, we've got a div here where the recommendations will be inserted just so you can see them. So this is just a way of visualizing the behavior of the recommender. It's not a serious kind of recommender system. And then we've got the main bits of JavaScript. So it's an object-oriented, right? We're creating a new recommender. That's going to like load up the recommender. If that's got built into it, it'll load it up from local storage. Then when the window loads, it'll call the show recommendation method, which is, I think, are we highlighting all this? Yep, here's the show recommendation method. So remember we have that recommender part of the web page, which is the recommendation div. So all we're doing is we're getting the top keyword and plonking it in the top of the page. So that's this stuff here. And then here we have the search part, and this search part's called, so if we're back and forth, so whenever I click for search, that's just mimicking what would happen on a real website. Whenever I click on search, I'm going to call this search part, and all that does is it gets what the user's searching for and adds as a keyword to the recommendation, to the recommender, and then it calls the show recommendation method again. So just a demo. Obviously, this would, in practice, do a proper search and get some products and all the rest of it. But what you could do in your websites is whenever the user clicks on search, before you actually do all the searching business, you could add the search term to your recommender. And then when you load the page, the recommender could do the AJAX or whatever it is to pull the products matching the recommendation and put them in the page. Okay, so I think that's covered that. So I can give you a little demo now. All right, so what I've got here, I'm using, remember I was kind of outputting the recommended data structure here on the console. So here on the right, we've got the Chrome debugging tool showing, and we'll be able to see the output of what the recommender looks like after each search. And here we've got the web page itself. This is where I put my search term, search for the various things, and then this is where the recommendations themselves will be generated. So if I search for kitten, for example, maybe it's some kind of place where you can purchase kittens. Then we search for that, and so when I've searched for it once, you can see we've got kitten. It's recorded. I've searched for it once, and this is the Unix time. This is like a timestamp in milliseconds, number of milliseconds since 1970, I think, some date in 1970. But anyway, it's a timestamp in milliseconds and the time at which it's searched. And at the bottom here, you can see, because I've searched for that, it's generating a recommendation kitten. Now, with a bit of luck, so now if I refresh the page, it disappears because it's got a 10-second timeout, and I spent more than 10 seconds explaining it. So now if I search for kitten 10 times, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, say, and then I search for something else, like, I don't know, pony, whatever, maybe you can sell ponies and kittens, this website. So now we can see we've got kitten has a count of 6 with that timestamp, and pony has a count of 1 with a slightly different timestamp. So if I refresh this, it's still, it's timed out again, right? So let's search for kitten, blah, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bum, 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 and pony. So at the moment, it's recommending kitten because it's the most popular keyword. If I keep refreshing the page, it should eventually switch to pony because the kitten keyword's timed out, and pony is the only keyword, and then eventually it disappears. So, and if we so search for pony, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to pick the most popular one. So if they're both valid, we've got pony and kitten. So eventually it's recommending pony now, and eventually ponies becomes more popular. I'm searching for kitten here, actually. What am I doing? So kittens now count 8. Right, so kittens count 8, pony 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then it's recommending pony because there's more, the kitten's timed out anyway. But you get the general idea, right? The keywords are timing out, and it's recommending the most popular one out of the ones in its current list. So this is only JavaScript search tracking. As I said, you need to do something to actually get the products. Maybe you could send it to the server using AJAX, or if you want to use the more traditional approach where you're sort of sending forms or whatever, you could use a hidden form field. You could update an input with type hidden, and then you could set the value to the most popular keyword or something, and then whenever the customer sort of added things submitted that form, the website that returned, so you can even add the recommending thing to the, because suppose you had a search functionality on your website where you click on the search button and it submits the form, and then the PHP returns a list of product, like a product page, right, displaying the products you've searched for. Well, within that form, you've got the text input field, right, but you could have a hidden form field, and the JavaScript could put the value of that hidden form field to the recommended keyword, so that when you submitted your search, it would submit both the explicit term you searched for and the hidden and the recommended keyword. Or you could just do it all server-side, right? If you're sending lots of searches to your website, you could use the session variable to hold the recommender, but the session variable is not a good idea for this because you want to store history for longer than a session. You want to store history for maybe a week. So then you could, then that's kind of why it's better to use the JavaScript and the client-side storage, but then find a way of sending that data to the server. Yep. So example code, as usual, is available. As I said, doesn't fully work, so more than welcome to use it as a starting point because that's all it's going to be. So in this lecture, I've just given you one way in which you can do customer tracking recommendation. If you want to do deep learning, some super sophisticated statistics, that's all fine. Use your own approach, come up with your own ideas, that's great. I'm just trying to give you enough to get you started with this part of your project because there's 10 marks for it. And the next lecture is going to cover testing.